Hi, and welcome to the Srimad Bhagavatam. Today it's another very interesting episode. We're on the third canto, chapters number 24 and 25. We're going to hear about another avatar. Avatars have come to this world from time to time, and though they've become very popular in the recent series of movies, which are fascinating in themselves, I must say, with all their 3D effects and everything else. But the real avatars, or the avatars of Vishnu, an avatar is an incarnation. That means that which is sublime, that which is divine, that which is God, incarnates or comes to this world. And what we learn from the Vedas, which are the ancient texts of knowledge from thousands of years ago, is that avatars have been coming to this earth for tens and even hundreds of thousands of years, well before the ice ages began, well before the present times that we know are all of recorded history, as archaeologists would tell us, which only really goes back to about maybe 11, 12,000 years for the most part. And of course, then they go a little further back and say, well, human beings started around 300,000 years ago. But hey, there's a whole other history that they haven't tapped into, that history that is recorded since ancient time. And it's a history that is so profound, a history of the world, of the planet, that it's mind-boggling. Now, if you look at those ancient monuments all across the world, from the pyramids to the Stonehenge to Machu Picchu, and you go down to all these things in South America and Turkey and so on. There have been wonderful shows made about all of that, but most of those go back maybe 10, 12,000 years, because they were huge monuments made of stone. And because they were made of massive stones and rocks, they survived the onslaught of ice ages and the onslaughts of so many different cataclysms that occurred on this planet. And they have records on them. In fact, there are temples in India that have records of dinosaur-like creatures. So how? Dinosaurs were supposed to be there a few million years ago, and these temples, they say, were only 10,000 years old. How did the people of that time, who hadn't excavated, who hadn't seen, who hadn't done what modern archaeologists have done, how did they know of the shapes of these dinosaurs that existed a few million years ago? But they're there. They're there for us to see, carved on the temple walls. So what I'm getting at is this, that there is a history of the world that has been forgotten. And in that history, what happened through the Vedas is they passed down the information, because yes, while much of the earth would get wiped out and most of the people in it, some would survive. And higher wisdom and knowledge would be passed on to the survivors through those who had managed, who understood these cycles, who knew how to weather these storms, and who knew how to pass down this information. See, today you can find out some information by inscriptions on rocks. That's his best. Otherwise, everything in history is lost. We have no idea of what happened to places that are rumored to have been around, like Atlantis. We don't know where they went. We don't know what they were about, and we certainly didn't know what they believed. We can guess, we can speculate through, or we can even interpret from the teachings of some of the famous people like Socrates and so on and so forth, but we don't really know for sure. The Vedas stand out as a record of history unlike any other. They've been handed down by word of mouth from one generation, one civilization to another, through perfectly orchestrated hymns and verses in Sanskrit, the most ancient language of all. And in that, there is record of some very amazing things. Now, as I was saying earlier, the record is there of these avatars, avatars of Vishnu, of the Supreme Being, coming to earth from time to time for two purposes, two very specific purposes. And that was to annihilate those who were creating a disturbance on this planet and who were destroying it, as some people are doing now, and to bring the wisdom of self-realization of how we can get out of this world and how we can begin the process and ultimately reach the destination of enlightenment, of self-realization. So in the earlier stories that we heard from the Bhagavatam, we heard of Varaha, the incarnation of Vishnu as a boar who came to battle with Hiranyaksha, a demonic entity who was trying to take down the earth, and how the earth was rescued by Varaha. Now we're going to read about Kapil, Kapila. Kapil was a great teacher of the Sankhya philosophy, and that's what he came to bring to this world. As we've seen, as I was talking about earlier, more evolved civilizations would come and present the knowledge to lesser evolved people. But here in this case, we're talking about the beginning of the Satya Yuga, the golden age, millions of years ago, in which this knowledge was being passed down to Kardam Muni and his wife. They had a child whose name was Kapil. So why do we need this knowledge? What is the reason? What is the importance? What is the relevance? See, we come to this world with no idea why we're here. Like most of us, like even when I was a kid, I had no idea. Why am I here? What am I doing? What is this life all about? I used to ask people these questions, and I thought I was nuts for asking. Like, hey, get on with it, get a career, get a job, do something, become an engineer. That's what they used to tell me. And I was like, no, I need to know. Why am I here? What is this world? What are we doing? We're going to die. We're going to leave it all behind. I want to know the answers. And they didn't have them. So I read a lot. But for most people, they're not going that far. They're not going that deep. And they're basically trying things out. Whether that something is to be a business person, to make tons of money, whether it is to be in fashion, whether it is to be creative, whether it is to be a scientist, we're all trying different things. 8 billion of us on this planet, trying 8 billion different things. Each one of those things is an experiment, an adventure. And each one of us is on an adventure of our own, a very unique one. Every one of our stories is different. And every one of those stories is teaching us something. And every one of those stories is showing us what works, what doesn't work. And we're going through our lives by trial and error, trying to figure it all out. Now tell me, if you had to figure out the alphabet by trial and error, it might be very difficult to learn to get to the place where you could actually read. If you had to invent the alphabet every single time and every single person had to do that. So that's why we have knowledge that is gathered together, placed into books, presented by teachers, and then they in turn help us take the knowledge and wisdom that has been learned over hundreds of years, and now we can take it and build it further. And that's exactly what was going on. So the knowledge of self-realization and liberation, of how to become free of the influence of this world, is what we need more than anything else. Because you can make your world very comfortable by having a nice home, by having beautiful furniture and air conditioning and all the other comforts of life, cars and even airplanes if you so desire. But ultimately you get old, you get diseased, you die. And what's the cure for that? They say they'll have one day, but so far we're not doing too great with that. So far, almost all of us will go through this cycle of aging, this cycle of getting sick and eventually of dying. Now it's not to scare us, it's just the reality. The reality is in front of us, and we can bury our head under the sand like an ostrich, or close our eyes like a rabbit, or we can face the reality and we can say, okay, what can I do about this? How can I rise beyond this? And how can I find a solution to this dilemma? So that requires knowledge, and we don't have to invent that knowledge. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. What we need is to be able to tap into the wisdom that has been passed down by the sages, by the rishis, by the wise people from ancient times. And then, of course, we can take it further, but we need that background, we need that foundation. Today, I see a lot of people on the spiritual path inventing their own things, the law of attraction and this and that and so many different, but there's not based on any foundation. They're just newfound ideas that they're playing with. Some of them have some basis. Most of them are purely experimental, and most of them don't succeed for most people. But the ancient science being handed down in the Vedas was so precise that anyone who would apply it would see the result. It might take a little time, but they would see the result. I can speak for myself. In having tried these things out, they work. I've seen the result. I've seen them, and I have the confidence with which to be able to tell you, hey, here's something that actually works. I'm not saying other things don't work. There are many ancient paths, and many of them work. And there are some modern paths, and some of those work. I'm not denying anything that works, but we need something that works. And if it has been tried, tested, and proven, it has a greater likelihood of working, right? So the Bhagavatam, as I was telling you earlier, talks about this wisdom. And Kapila, as I was telling you earlier, was an incarnation of Vishnu who came for exactly this purpose thousands of years ago during the Satya Yuga, to teach us how to become free from Maya or illusion and become self-realized. He taught it to his mother, Devahuti. Now, we've been talking about Devahuti in the earlier episodes, Devahuti and Kardam, and their marriage and their beautiful honeymoon and their romance and how they traveled all over the universe on their beautiful mansion, house-like mansion. I could have been a UFO, I don't know, but they describe it as an aerial mansion. And then how they come back, and now they have babies. They have 9 daughters and 1 son. And the 1 son is the one we're going to be talking about today. See, the problem is the mind is very powerful. And what Kardam Muni is going to tell you about is a different path, the path of the heart. The mind can analyze things and control things, but the heart can feel and experience and intuit and create and expand our consciousness in ways that the mind cannot. A lot of people follow their mind. Intellectually, they want to understand spirituality, and there's nothing wrong in that, right? They want to be able to analyze and understand it from that perspective. But there is a way of the heart, and that way of the heart is called Bhakti. Bhakti is devotion. Devotion for the divine, devotion for God, love of God, if that's what you want to call it. See, the heart is the pathway to bhakti, to devotion. And the heart expands expands while the mind contracts. See, the mind wants to control things. The mind wants to hold on to memories. The mind is based upon and analyzing and interpretation, and then whatever it interprets it wants to believe. So it really holds on to things. The heart, on the other hand, is expansive. Of course, we fall in love with someone and then we want to control them, but that's our mind coming in, our ego coming in, now overpowering the heart. But the heart is actually by its very nature expansive. Love is by its very nature expansive, as has been shown by so many of the great teachers that have come in the past. The heart is connected to the soul, and if we learn to access its hidden pathways, we will easily and effortlessly learn to slip into a power far greater than that of our mind. See, the idea is to go from here and into here and through the heart into the soul. The heart is closest to the soul and has immediate access to it. So if you learn the art, you'll be able to find out exactly how to get into that. Now, some people have called that process flow. Some call it love. Some say it's mystical. But whatever name you give it, the path to the heart opens up through surrender, and it invites in grace and divine love. To learn more about this, let's turn to the Bhagavatam and see what it has to share with us. So, as I was mentioning to you earlier, our story begins with Kardam and his mystical vision of Vishnu, who appears to him on Garuda. Now, after that, he gets married. After he gets married, they have children, as I was saying earlier, and then we move to the next part of that story. So Vishnu had told Kardam that he was going to meet his wife Devahuti and she would have 9 daughters and a son. The son, Kapil, would be the incarnation of Vishnu, who would teach the world the Sankhya philosophy. When Kapil was born, it is said that the demigods, you've heard of the concept of demigods here, I'm sure, but those of you that are new, the idea is that God does not do everything him and herself. God appoints other people to do stuff, living entities like you and me, very empowered, and they handle the elements, they handle the affairs of the world, they handle the running of the universe. That which is the divine doesn't need to do all that himself. So the demigods, that's what we call them, sounded musical instruments and showered flowers upon the home of Kapil. And the apsaras, or the celestial dancing girls, danced in joyful ecstasy. Then Brahma, the creator of the universe, once again, the universe is not created by the divine being or God. Brahma is given the job of creating the universe. He, accompanied by sages, he came to the home of Kardam and Devahuti, which was by the river Saraswati. And he informed them that Vishnu, the Param Brahma, the supreme being, right? The Brahma is the universe, and the Param Brahma is that which is the greatest being in the universe, had incarnated in the womb of Devahuti to disseminate transcendental knowledge of the Sankhya philosophy for the benefit of the human race. He, that is the Param Brahma, or Kapil, as he was going to be called in this incarnation, is Shuddha Sattva, pure goodness, uncontaminated by the modes of passion or ignorance. Now this quality of Shuddha Sattva, Sattva is, you've heard the word sattvic food, for example, you might have heard about. Well, that comes from Sattva, the mode of goodness. And the mode of goodness is what we cultivate when you are more peaceful, when you are more clean, when you are more kind, when you are more loving, you are more empathetic. Those are the qualities of the mode of goodness. However, no matter how much of the mode of goodness we all develop, it will always be contaminated by the modes of passion and ignorance. Because, for example, if I'm a good person, let's say some people say, I want to be a good person, I want to be a good human being. Okay, but in your goodness, it doesn't mean you're going to be free of occasional bursts of anger. It doesn't mean that you will not be free, you will not sometimes feel lazy and not want to do anything, or that you won't get depressed, or that you won't feel any of those other aspects of being human. So your goodness is not pure. There's times you'll be selfish. There's times you'll be mean. We will have flaws no matter how good we try to be. And therefore this idea of just trying to be good, that is not the mode of goodness. The mode of goodness is a particular energy, just as is the mode of passion and the mode of ignorance. Pure goodness is something that only exists in spirit. It exists in the soul. It exists in the spiritual world. It exists in God. So that Shuddha Sattva, Shuddha means pure and Sattva means goodness. That Shuddha Sattva, or pure goodness, that was the energy of Kapil. Brahma was pleased that Kardam, his son, actually Kardam was the son of Brahma, had followed his instructions and thus shown respect. So this is kind of the way that it's done, was that the son following the instructions of the father, and then so on and so forth. And that's of course because people cultivated great wisdom, and to follow their father meant to follow the path of wisdom. It doesn't happen these days. We don't see people cultivating wisdom, and we don't therefore have very wise fathers. But I wish we did, and it would be wonderful. So Brahma had instructed Kardam to marry and to have children, and Kardam had done that. And now he instructed Kardam to marry his daughters to the most advanced sages. So they were getting their children married to very highly evolved beings. Why do you think that was so? Because the idea was that by uniting with very highly evolved beings or sages, the children that would come would be of a very high quality of consciousness. Those children would in turn help raise the consciousness of this planet. Today we find that no one either tries to become highly evolved, or very few people do, and those who do seek this path are interested more in how to look great in yoga pants, or how to, carry on some fashion with their the latest yoga studio, or how to do meditation, which is about dancing and movement. And yes, those things work, but hey, we don't have millions of lifetimes to be able to go through this slow and easy, sensuous path of self-realization. We need a path that is direct and more focused and more to the point. And so we need to be able to associate with highly evolved beings. We need to make those people our friends, or our partners, or our lovers, or our husbands, or our wives. And in their association, speed up the path of our spiritual awakening. So Brahma then told his son Kapila how he would how he would help his mother break free, how Kapil, the son, was going to help his mother break free from the knots of ignorance and doubt to become self-realized. The son would then leave home and travel the world teaching. Their son Kapil would be the head of all perfected souls. And having given all these predictions, Brahma left for his home. The sage Karda Muni offered prayers to his son, the incarnation of Vishnu. Saying how grateful he was that he had appeared as his son to help the suffering souls who are in material entanglement. You see, the depth of compassion of these people is that he's not interested in his son becomes rich or a multimillionaire. He's not interested whether his son has a home or doesn't have a home. He's not interested in what the career of his son is going to be. He's interested and proud and happy about the fact that his son is going to help suffering souls who are in material entanglement. And then Kardam, the father, goes on to say to his son, I surrender unto the Supreme Being, descended as Kapil, his son, who is independently powerful and transcendental, who is the Lord of matter and time, and the maintainer and destroyer of all universes. Kardam then told Kapil about his desire to take sannyas. He says, look, I've done this whole marriage thing, and now I want to be a mendicant. I want to renounce. I want to go to the forest. I want to be a sannyasi, a monk. He told him that he had cleared his karmic debts and fulfilled all his desires. Like, I've done with all that stuff now. I've enjoyed the world. And now it's time I want to renounce family life, and I wish to wander about free from lamentation and suffering in this world, thinking always of you in my heart. That is the way of the Vedic culture, is to help us come to that level of detachment and renunciation. One should never fake that. One should not pretend. I recently met some people who were like, yeah, man, I'm like about 60 years old. I just want to take sannyas, just move away. Yeah, my wife and I, we fight too much. But, I just want some peace and quiet. I said, listen, man, you're not going to get, that is not the point of sannyas. The point of sannyas is you've reached the stage of complete detachment from the world. There is no attachment to anything. Even if you were given millions of dollars, it doesn't matter to you. If you'd have to sleep on the street or you have to sleep in a palace, it doesn't make a difference to you. Now you're detached from all things of this world. When you see all people the same, you have equal vision, when you're able to recognize that you are truly the soul and not the body, when you're no longer attached to the things of this body, of the world, of the senses, then you are ready for sannyas. Don't fake it, don't imitate it, don't pretend it, because then you'll definitely come crashing down. And a lot of people do. I've seen too many of those, and it's sad. It's sad because people fall for it. They see them in their lovely saffron robes, monk robes, and they think, oh, this person is so highly evolved. But no, not necessarily. Not just because they're wearing some robes doesn't mean they're highly evolved. One has to see them by their character and their behavior and their way of the way they are in the world. Anyway, Kapil, the son, now says to his father, I have appeared in this world to explain the philosophy of Sankhya, which is highly esteemed for self-realization by those desiring freedom from the entanglement of unnecessary material desires. So be very clear about this. We all have material desires. Everybody does. We need certain things to be able to live in the world, and very few of us have no material desires. But the point is to simplify our life, to cut out the unnecessary things, to cut it down to the bare minimum, to lead a simple life. Some people call that, what's the word? When you have a minimalistic life, right? To keep it really, really simple as possible, and not to indulge the senses or the mind or the desires. And then focus one's attention and time and energy on one's spiritual growth. So he says that this path is highly esteemed for self-realization by those desiring freedom from the entanglement of unnecessary material desires. This path of self-realization, which is difficult to understand, has now been lost in the course of time. I have incarnated to introduce and explain this philosophy to human society again. Now, being sanctioned by me, go as you desire, he tells his father, surrendering all your activities to me, conquering insurmountable death, worship me for eternal life. In your own heart, through your intellect, you will always see me, the supreme self-effulgent soul, dwelling within the hearts of all living entities. Thus you will achieve the state of eternal life, free from all lamentation and fear. So something else that I point out to a lot of people who say, oh, I'm saved. And they think, oh, I'm going to heaven. I said, no. If you haven't found heaven here, if you haven't been saved here, then you're not going to be saved in some future lifetime or some future place or after death. And what does it mean to be saved? It means to be saved means to see God everywhere, in everything, in everyone, in all creatures, even the ones you hate and even the ones you like, right? And to experience eternal life here and now, in this body, in this time, to experience yourself as a soul, not as this body. So if you are in fear for anything, then you're not in that state of consciousness. You are not saved. You are not free. You are not liberated. That freedom, that liberation needs to be experienced right here, right now. And then the symptom of that is you will be free from all lamentation and fear. If you go around trying to make your, as people do today, their trauma, my trauma, my trauma, my trauma. Hey, you're holding on to your trauma. You're holding on to your emotions. You're holding on to your suffering. Well, how are you going to become free of it? By holding on to it. It's not going to happen. You got to let it go. Yes, it's something that happened. Yes, it was terrible. Yes, let's acknowledge it. And having acknowledged it, let it go. It happened to this body, mind, organism. Yes, it was terrible. We empathize. But after that, quit circularly thinking about it over and over again, repeating it again and again to people, thinking that somehow, if you say it enough times, then magically it will disappear. No, it won't. It will just become impregnated, embedded into your mind, into your psyche, and it will control you from there on. You will see and feel yourself a victim of the things that have happened. And that is not liberation. That is not freedom. So the father Kardam then circumambulated his son, went around him, and then left for the forest. Gradually, he became unaffected by the false ego of material identity and became free from material affection. This is a really powerful line. He became unaffected by the false ego of material identity. See, our material identity is such a powerful thing. We believe we are this body. Recently, I was having a conversation with someone who was discussing with me about gender dysphoria and about how they were identified with, well, right now they were in a female body, but then thinking maybe they're actually male and maybe they should now go through a gender identity change. And I was like, hold on a minute. Let's start from the beginning. Who are you? Are you this body? Are you either male or female? Or are you the person who has a body, the one who has a mind? I said, well, I have a body. Okay. And I said, this lifetime you've been dealt with a female body. You feel very masculine, but we all have masculine and feminine qualities within us because we have been male and female in different lifetimes. So you're going to have that. And plus, that is an indication of the nature of the divine. The soul that is within you has both masculine and feminine qualities. God has both masculine and feminine qualities, both. So that doesn't mean that God is transgender or that you are transgender. It simply means that you have these qualities and they are there for you to play with. You don't need to go around changing your body for that, because the ill effects of that have already been seen by a lot of people who tried to do that. And they've been very, very, very unhappy with what happened after they had those crazy operations that people are going through right now. If you identify with being more masculine, though you're in a female body, go ahead, dress that way, act that way, be that way. You can always come back, right? So play. You can play any which way you like. Don't play with nature. It's a little harder at that point to go back. And then if you have regrets, gosh, you're going to keep on cutting up your body and keep on stitching it back together and bringing parts from here and bringing parts there. It's craziness. The first reality is you're not the body. And since you're not the body, don't get identified with either male or female, or both, or trans, right? Realize that this is not who you are and find the real you. Go behind this. Find the real self. And then you will have freedom from this mind that is tormenting you right now. That is what you don't want to play into. You don't want to play into your mind and the way it keeps on spinning around and telling you something or other. And when you got the one thing, then it wants the other thing. When you got that thing, it wants the other thing. You're just going to be its slave. So don't do stuff like that. Okay. And then he continues talking about the qualities of Kardam as he goes into the forest and he becomes more and more detached from the false ego of material identity. And he says he becomes undisturbed, equal to everyone, and without duality. Without duality means dualistic thinking, positive, negative, right, wrong, good, bad. See, people think they're religious because they have a very strong moral compass, a strong idea of what is right and wrong. No. That's not a highly evolved being. That's a very moralistic person. That's a very righteous person. But that's very much a person stuck in their ego who thinks their way of thinking is the right way. A truly evolved being doesn't think in terms of dualistic terms, positive and negative, right and wrong, good and bad. Those are all constructs of the mind. They are not the constructs of God. The constructs of God are non-dual. And when they are non-dual, there is no right or wrong. There is no good or bad. Yes, we need those things to function in this world. I'm not saying we don't need them, but I'm not saying those are the symptoms of a highly evolved being either. We need to understand the difference. We have codes with which to live our life. Those may be the codes of how to live in society. Those may be the codes of what it takes for us to interact with each other. That's fine. But let's not confuse them as being the symptoms of a highly evolved being. A highly evolved being is this: undisturbed by the world, equal to everyone, and without any concept of duality, non-dual in their outlook. He could see indeed himself also. His mind was turned inward and was perfectly calm like an ocean, unagitated by waves. Thus he became liberated from conditioned life and could see the Supreme Being is seated in everyone's heart, and that everyone is existing in him, in God. Freed from all hatred and desire, he was equal to everyone and ultimately attained the path back to the spiritual world, back to Godhead. All right, so now we come to the part where the son Kapil is instructing his mother, Devahuti. Kapil and Devahuti. And I don't know if they lived in a palatial thing like you see in the picture here. They live more in the forest and in a hut, but that's all right. That's how the artist has chosen to depict it here. And there's one more picture of Kapil. And apparently he had golden hair, so kind of blonde in his hair. So that's an interesting version that is mentioned as well. All right. Shaunak Rishi said, there is no one who knows more, no one more worshipable or more mature a yogi than the Supreme Being. He is the master of the Vedas, and to hear about him always is the actual pleasure of the senses. So, we all seek sensual pleasure, but the real sensual pleasure, the real satisfaction of the senses lies in hearing about the Supreme Being. That's what satisfies the soul. That's the food for the soul. Otherwise, it's only food for the body. Now, Devahuti, the mother, inquired from her son. She says, my dear son, I am very sick of the disturbance caused by my material senses, for because of them, I have fallen into the abyss of ignorance. So, when we follow our senses, they lead us astray. They lead us into the abyss of ignorance because they're only looking at what is short-term pleasure. They're looking at what feels good now. But they don't necessarily look at what feels good in the long term. So, for example, sugar feels good now. But the long-term effects could be diabetes. The long-term effects could damage our heart and could shorten our life. Well, our senses don't understand that. We have to be intelligent. We have to understand that where our senses are taking us isn't usually the best place for us. So that's why she says, my material senses have led me into an abyss of ignorance. She says to her son, you are the only means of getting out of this darkest region of ignorance because you are my transcendental eye. You're like my third eye, which by your mercy alone I have attained after many, many births. So after many births of spiritual practice, she has attained a son like this, who is like her third eye, her eye of wisdom, who can show her the way. You are the Supreme Godhead, the origin of all living entities. You have appeared to dissipate the darkness of the ignorance of the universe. I take shelter of your lotus feet, which are like an axe that can cut down the tree of material existence. You are the greatest of all transcendentalists, and I inquire from you as to the relationship between spirit and matter. Now, this is such an important point, because we are spiritual beings in a material body, in a material world. So we need to know the relationship between spirit and matter. We need to understand how to be in this world and yet not be affected by it. Right? How to cut down the tree of material existence, as is mentioned here, which means to not let material existence have power over us. Just like we don't want to let our mind have power over us. We don't want the circumstances of the world, the situations that occur, whether that's someone cutting in front of you in the road, or someone who, where there is a big line where you have to wait for something, or whether there is someone who speaks some ill words to you, to not let that stuff affect you. That's really the challenge of being of spiritual growth, is being able to become unaffected. And it's very interesting now when it talks about Kapila, just like it said in the Bhagavad Gita, it said Shri Bhagavan Uvacha, Bhagavan spoke. Bhagavan Kapil spoke, because he's an incarnation of Vishnu. And he says, after hearing of his mother's uncontaminated desire for transcendental realization, Kapil thanked her within himself for her questions. And thus, his face smiling, he explained the path of the transcendentalists who are interested in self-realization. He continued by saying, the yoga system which relates to the soul, listen very carefully, the yoga system which relates to the soul, which is meant for the ultimate benefit of the living entity, and which causes detachment from happiness and distress, is the highest yoga system. Think of this very carefully. The ultimate benefit of the living entity, which causes detachment from happiness and distress. The Vedic system does not recommend the pursuit of happiness, as is the American way. It rather says, become detached from happiness and distress, because all happiness is linked to unhappiness, and all unhappiness is linked to happiness. They come as peas in a pod. They come linked together. One follows the other as the night the day. There's no separating them. So the pursuit of happiness is also the pursuit of unhappiness. You cannot separate them. Why? Because when you get something and it makes you happy, then if you lose it or someone takes it away, well, now you're unhappy. You worked hard all your life, your wife or partner divorces you, takes away half or more of what you earned, now you're unhappy, right? Or, someone steals it, or the economy crashes, or just something happens, your business goes down. You're unhappy. I've known people who jumped off their skyscrapers that they erected, oil millionaires in Texas. This is way back when the price of oil had come down back then in the 80s. And they were jumping off the skyscrapers, killing themselves because their business had gone bust and they'd lost all their money. And now life was not worth living, so they were committing suicide. Rich, wealthy, billionaires. Right, that's what happens. The pursuit of happiness had now led them to extreme unhappiness. Kapil continues, when consciousness is attracted to the world, the living entity is in conditional life. So conditional life means if I have this, then I will be happy. It's conditional. If I'm with this person, then I will be in love, but not the other person. If then, right? That's basically conditional. And so everything in this world is like that. If I have a job, then I will be satisfied. But if I don't have a job, well, then I'll be miserable. If I have my desires, then I'll feel great. If I get a lottery, I'll feel fantastic. If then. So when consciousness is attached to the world, the living entity is in conditional life. And when it is attached to the Supreme, or God, then one is situated in the consciousness of liberation. Liberation means freedom. Freedom, I'm free. Free to be happy here and now. I don't need anything to happen. There is no need for anything to happen. Understand what that means. I am happy regardless of situations and circumstances, whether it's hot, whether it's cold, whether the economy's up or it's down, whether someone loves me or doesn't love me, whether I have a partner or don't, whether I'm young or I'm old. I'm happy. I don't give a damn about anything, right? That's the consciousness of liberation. He continues, when one is completely cleansed of the impurities of lust and greed, so lust meaning desire and greed, they work hand in hand, fueling each other, wanting more. This lust for more could be more of anything, right? Whatever it be. It's not just about sex. It's about money. It's about fame. It's about power. It's about more. Right? Bigger house, bigger car, bigger this. I want what the other person has. The impurities, when one is completely cleansed of the impurities of lust and greed, which are produced from the false identification of the body as I and bodily possessions as mine. So ultimately it's coming from this I and mine, which is the ego. Right? And it's the ego that now wants more and more and more, because it is never fulfilled. It's like a bottomless pit. So when one is cleansed of the impurities of lust and greed produced from the false identification of the body as I and the bodily possessions as mine, one's mind becomes purified. In that pure state, he transcends the stage of so-called material happiness and distress. Now it's giving you the key on how to get there. Becoming unidentified with I and mine. And through that, you will also become free of this conditional material happiness and distress. At that time, the soul can see himself to be transcendental to material existence and always self-effulgent, never fragmented, although very minute in size. In that position of self-realization, one sees everything in the right perspective. He becomes indifferent to material existence, and the material influence acts less powerfully upon you. This is what we all want. But we're trying to do it through material progress, through external things. But if you really want the material influence, the influence of the world, to not act as much upon you, to become less powerful, to lose its grip on you, the journey is inward, not outward. And therefore this self-realization of Brahma Siddhi is a path where one realizes that one is not matter, but pure soul. This is the heart of it. I am not this body. I am not matter. And matter is but an illusion. In fact, the matter that we are so proud of, that we so think is real, I just came across these figures that what we perceive with all of our senses and mind is 0.003% of the actual electromagnetic reality. Think about it. We're only perceiving 0.003%. Not even 1%, not even 0.5%, right? And we are so absorbed in this little tiny segment of what we see and hear and touch and feel that we are not aware of the rest. But the person who is self-realized actually, because their mind is uncluttered, is able to perceive a much bigger reality and tune into that reality. Some people have experienced that when they're on drugs. Of course, then they get hooked on drugs and then they become addicted to them. It's not a healthy way to do it. But through meditation, one can get to that naturally. The most auspicious path for attaining this is through the process of bhakti, or devotion to the Supreme Being, this path of self-realization. Symptoms of a sadhu. So he says, what are the symptoms of a person who is highly evolved? And this question was even taken up by Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita. So symptoms of a sadhu are that, and this is how we recognize a highly evolved being. The person is tolerant, merciful, friendly to all living entities, not just a few, has no enemies, is peaceful, abides by the Vedas, and all his characteristics are sublime. The sadhu renounces, and this is if you go one step further and become a renunciate. Sadhu is actually a renunciate. Renounces all family relationships and friendly acquaintances within the world. Engaged constantly in chanting and hearing about God, they do not suffer from material miseries, because they are always filled with thoughts of my pastimes and activities. By attachment to such sadhu. So now if you become attached to such a saintly person or such a sadhu, one can easily counteract the pernicious effects of material attachment and become attached to the Supreme Being or God. So the mother now, Devahuti, asks her son, dear son, it is very difficult for me to understand the absolute truth because my intelligence is not very great. Will you kindly explain it in a way that I can understand and feel transcendental happiness? And I think this is such an important piece. We all are not very intelligent, especially in this Kali Yuga, in this age that we live in. Somebody may have a very high IQ, but that doesn't mean they're very intelligent. Real intelligence is spiritual intelligence. So, you've heard of emotional intelligence, you've heard of intellectual intelligence, but there is also what is called spiritual intelligence. And spiritual intelligence is the ability to really deeply understand these things, to just get it. And the fact is that as you listen to these things and as you contemplate them, your spiritual intelligence will grow as you meditate, as you become more devoted, as you become more attached to God. You will find that spiritual intelligence will begin to grow within you. So she says, will you kindly explain it to me in a way that I can understand? And because when you understand it and you get it, you feel this transcendental bliss. So Kapila explained, he says, bhakti, or devotion to God without any motive. See, people go to God with motive. God, give me this, give me that. He says, when devotion is without any motive, then it dissolves the subtle body. What is the subtle body? That is man, that is the mind, buddhi, the intellect, and the ahankar, or the ego. So it dissolves the mind, the intellect, and the ego. They dissolve. What does it mean when it dissolves? They become like nothing. How do you do that? How do you make that happen? You do that by not trying to control the world, by not trying to analyze the world, by not trying to fix the world, but by learning to surrender. It is the opposite. So he says it dissolves the subtle body, the mind, intelligence, and ego of the living entity without separate effort. It's not like you got to do anything separately. Just as fire in the stomach digests all that we eat. That doesn't mean literal fire. It's the heat created in the stomach which works like fire. It's there in the Ayurveda as well, in the different doshas. So it talks about fire in the stomach that digests all that we eat. Just in the stomach digests everything we eat. Similarly, bhakti, or devotion to God, dissolves the subtle body, the mind, the intellect, and the ego. You come to a place which is naturally peaceful. It is therefore better than moksha or siddhi, than liberation or even yogic powers. Because yogic powers can somehow get you attached to them, and you can think of yourself as this powerful person who has all kinds of things that they can do. No, one doesn't want that. There are 5 kinds of moksha or liberation that are mentioned in the Vedas. The one of them is Sarsti, which means achieving opulence is equal to that of God. Sarupya, having a form like that of God. Samipya, having being a person associate of God. Salokya, living on the same planet as God. And Sayujya, merging into the light of God. So what Kapila is telling you is, take all of those and cast them aside, because there is something beyond that. Beyond even merging into the light, beyond becoming one with God. Yes, there is something far more powerful than that. He says, my devotee never desires to become one with me. See, when you love someone, when you're with them, for a moment, yes, you do feel a sense of oneness, a sense of connectedness. But you don't want to become that person. You don't want to lose yourself and become them. You want to maintain who you are and let them be who they are, so the two can come together and dance. There's a beauty in that. So the devotee who is there in devotion, in love of God, does not want to merge with God and become one with God, but wants to retain the separateness, not of the personality, but of the soul, the uniqueness of the soul. After all, every one of us is unique. Every soul is unique. That uniqueness we want to preserve, not the uniqueness of our personality, because that was created from this childhood and from the experiences of this life and of previous lifetimes, but the deeper uniqueness of the soul. That one doesn't want to lose. I want to be me and I want you to be you, and then we can be in a loving relationship. My devotees always see the smiling face of my form with eyes like the rising morning sun. They like to see my various transcendental forms, which are all benevolent, and they also talk favorably with me. Upon seeing my charming form smiling and attractive, and hearing my pleasing words, the devotee almost loses all other consciousness. Her senses are freed from all other engagements and become absorbed in devotion. Absorbed in thought of me, she does not even desire even the highest benediction obtainable in the upper planetary systems. He does not desire the eightfold material perfections obtained from mystic yoga, nor desire to be elevated to the kingdom of God. Yet, without even desiring them, the devotee enjoys, even in this life, all the offered benedictions and attains liberation without separate endeavor. Devotees who receive such transcendental opulences are never bereft of them. Neither weapons nor the change of time can destroy such opulences, because the devotee accept me as their friend, their relative, their son, their benefactor and supreme deity. They cannot be deprived of their possessions at any time. So this is such an important thing to understand, because the wealth you gain on your spiritual path is never lost. This is your eternal wealth. What you will gain as you spiritually evolve, I don't mean the knowledge you gain. The knowledge will be lost with this body. The growth you make spiritually, the closer you come to God, the more your heart opens up, the more you evolve spiritually, and the more progress you make towards these different symptoms that were described here, that will never be lost. That will go with you from this life into the next and into the next and into the next. And every piece that you build on that, like even if you forget in your next lifetime, right? And you forget all about it and you go into the world and you now just want to enjoy for a while and you just want to do a few things, all right. But you'll pick up again from where you left off. That's the beauty. So none of the progress you make is ever lost. This was stated in the Bhagavad Gita. This is being stated here by Kapila as well. He then continues, because they give up all aspirations to become happy in this world with wealth, children, home, or anything in relation with the body, I take them to the other side of birth and death. The terrible fear of birth and death can never be forsaken by anyone who resorts to any shelter other than myself, for I am the Almighty Supreme Godhead, the original source of all creation, and also the Supreme Soul of all souls. So what he says is that once you become connected with God, this terrible fear of birth and death is also gone. It's very difficult to do otherwise. It is because of my supremacy that the wind blows, the sun shines, fire burns, the clouds send forth showers, and death goes about taking its toll out of fear of me. The yogis equipped with transcendental knowledge and devotion enter into the kingdom of God without fear. They have conquered fear. Bhakti yoga, or the yoga of devotion, is the ultimate means for the attainment of the final perfection of life. So with that, we'll end this part of the Bhagavatam. And I would love to know what you've been thinking, and to read your questions and to find out what your thoughts are. Oh my gosh, this is such a beautiful quote. Silly or Cindy writes here, an interesting quote: the heart is forever making the head its fool. Quote by Khalil Gibran. Yes, the heart is forever making the head its fool. Thank you so much. That is such a beautiful quote. Yes, absolutely. The heart has a wisdom far greater than that of the head. The head might be practical, it might be knowledgeable, it might be whatever, but it is very limited in its scope. CC writes, when Jesus said, here, let's bring this up here, the truth will set you free. Did he mean the truth of seeing reality as oneness, connectivity, non-duality, and becoming liberated from conditioned life? The truth will set you free. Did he mean the truth of seeing reality as oneness, connectivity, non-duality? Yes. Beautiful way of linking that up. Thank you, Cece. In reality, yes, the truth will set you free. Okay. Whoa, this is so good. Thanks for bringing this up. I love this point. When he says the truth, he does not mean my truth, your truth, and everybody else's truth. Those are relative truths. The truth is the absolute truth. The absolute truth is God. And the absolute truth is the path of liberation. It is therefore the path of oneness or connectivity or non-duality and becoming liberated from conditional life. Absolutely right. I love the way you pointed that out. Thank you. In fact, that is it. The truth is that, so the Bhagavatam begins with this. It defines the truth. Janmadiyasya yataha itarascharteshu abhigyah swarat. He says the absolute truth is reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all. So what is that reality when distinguished from illusion? Illusion is the world. So it says that which is eternal is that which is real, and that which is temporary is that which is false. Everything in this world is temporary, and therefore everything in this world is false. And now, of course, scientists have proven that by looking at the electron microscopes, and they see practically that everything in this world is an illusion. So, but what is eternal? Energy. The energy of which this universe is made. That energy, when it is conscious, so there's energy which is not conscious, and there's energy which is conscious. So there's energy, heat energy, light energy. That's not conscious, right? But then there's energy which is conscious, the energy in me, in you, in all living beings, in the animals, in the fish, in the birds. That energy, that is conscious. And that energy, when you begin to see that all are the same, there is no difference between the insect, the bird, the animal, the cow, or the human being. There is no difference. They all have that same life force energy called the soul. That energy is the reality. And when you realize that that energy is the same in all, then you realize that I am no different than you and you are no different than me. And yet we are different. We are different and we are not different. That's the beauty of it. We are none different, right? We are the same, made of the same stuff. And yet each one of us has unique characteristics. At the soul level, I don't even mean at the body level or the mind level, at the soul level, we have unique characteristics. And so that uniqueness is that unique perspective from which we view the world. Two twins might be born into a particular family, let's say of alcoholics or whatever, right? And yet one of them will respond to that situation in one way, one might become an alcoholic, and the other might never touch alcohol. It's been seen many times. So how each person responds has very much to do with their own unique nature and not just the circumstances. Cece has another question here. So she says, so the truth is knowing, it's like here she is knowing Jesus and what he represented, the liberation of the ego and unconditional love, freeing ourselves from the chains holding us down. Yes, Jesus in fact spent a great deal of time in India and studied with the masters there and was very aware of all these teachings. So when he's talking about the truth and he's living that truth, and he's talking about that becoming liberated from the ego and feeling unconditional love. He's talking about trusting in God. He says, you see the birds in the trees, they neither sow, neither do they reap into barns, yet your heavenly Father provided for them. Are you not much better than they? He's talking to people about trusting in God. He's talking about being able to walk on a path in which we are connected with each other and with nature and with God. We can trust that we will be taken care of. But now we feel, no, I have to work hard, and if I don't, I won't be taken care of. But it shows in every aspect of his life that he was living example of love of God. And he was teaching that by his example. And Seeley writes, relationship to our personality is limiting, yet through its trials we grow towards the wisdom of our soul, which is always expanding. Yes, the connection we have with our personality is definitely limiting. We identify with this personality. We identify with this body, with the mind, with its way of thinking, with its beliefs, with its experiences, with the story. And all of that is extremely limiting. It traps us. It's like putting us into a straitjacket. But what we do need to do is take the stuff we've experienced in life, the things we've learned, the trials and tribulations we've had. Those are all gold. They are the greatest fuel for our growth. And when we take those, and it's like you extract the pearl from the oyster. You don't need the whole oyster. Just take out that pearl. That's all you need. Take out the pearl of wisdom from your life experience. Don't hold on to the experiences. Take out the pearl of wisdom from there. And then take that pearl of wisdom and integrate that into your life. Live it. Start to live from that place. And you'll see, because life is designed to give you the exact experiences you need for your growth. So everything that's coming to you is exactly for that. It's coming for you, to grow you, to evolve you, to take you to the next level. And instead of resisting it, because resisting it is what you call suffering, and learning from it is what you call growing or evolving. So if you're suffering, then you're resisting reality. You're resisting what's showing up in your life. Instead, take that experience and say, what's in it for me here? What can I learn from here? What can I take from here? This has come for me, for my benefit. That experience could be death. That experience could be old age. That experience could be the loss of something or someone. Whatever it is, it's all coming to show you what life is. And the more you learn about it, the more you will find yourself free and happy. It's been a wonderful time. Is there any other people, maybe the folks on Zoom, would any of you like to ask any questions? Should I get you on? Let's put you on for now.
So, Rohit,
Yeah.
Kapil Muni is in one of the Dasha avatars, right? And I know your very first lecture you went through the different kinds of avatar. What kind of avatar is Kapil Muni?
Yeah, so there are actually more than 10 avatars. The Dash avatar you're talking about, there are 10 avatars. But the Srimad Bhagavatam actually talks about, oh gosh, I forget the number, is it 24 I think it's 24 avatars of Vishnu.
I see.
And Kapil is one of them. Buddha is
Right.
another. Earlier,
Yeah.
the first one we came across as we began is Varaha, the boar.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now we're coming to Kapil, and we'll come
Yeah.
across a whole bunch of others along
I
the
see.
way, right? And then all of these, there's a very specific purpose, and ultimately it'll come to Krishna, and then we'll come to
So it goes
Kalki.
chronologically in the in the
Yeah, that's a
Srimad
good
Bhagavatam, does it?
question. I don't know if it's chronological or not, but I do
Okay.
know that
Okay.
Kapil is from the Satya Yuga, and Satya Yuga is the golden age. So we are in Kali Yuga right now: Satya Yuga, Treta, Dwapar, and Kali, right?
Yeah.
The four yugas, the four ages. So we're in the
Yeah.
last of those four, and then it'll go back to Satya Yuga again. And it's
I
interesting
see.
how even in the Bible it talks of the same things. It talks about how there will come a time where Christ comes and then everybody will be taken from this world, and then there'll be a
Yeah.
golden age that will last, according to them, for 1,000 years. The Vedas say it differently in terms of the time, but the same idea is there.
Yeah. Yeah.
That there will be a golden age. There will be a
Yeah.
time where then they say the devil will be chained up and there will be no more influence of that. And the same thing is there in the Vedas. It talks about how in the golden age, in the Satyug, there is no more the influence of all this craziness that we have right now, the evil stuff that we have right now. So all this gets
Mm-hmm.
wiped out. That's why we have all these ice ages. That's why we have the earth tilts on its axis. It's so fascinating what happens, and no
It
one's able to
is. Yeah.
fully explain it to me. Though I
Yeah.
just love to learn about it. You know, how
Yeah.
the earth tilts and then boom, everything gets the whole environment changes. The ice age comes, everything gets knocked out. People have to run to some, certain corners of the earth where they can survive. The rest all get wiped out. And then how evolved beings come and then they disseminate the knowledge and then life comes back again.
Right. Right.
It's
It's
quite
beautiful.
fascinating.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right. I think thank you. Thank you for all your inputs. Thank you for being here. And I wish you all a wonderful night. Jai Shri Krishna. Hare Krishna. Jai Shri Radhe. I'll see you all next week.